Don't call me gringo, you fucking beaner. Stay on your side of the goddamn river. Don't call me gringo, you beaner. No me digas beaner, Mr. Puñetero. Te sacaré un susto por racista y culero. No me llames frijolero, pinche gringo puñetero.
In this issue of Crushing Capitalism, we discuss undocumented workers, or, depending on your perspective, illegal immigration. To start, it's not acceptable for any society to solve its problems by exporting them to other societies, including unemployment. But having said this, should we be targeting the undocumented worker? And the answer is no. For one, many of these people have left their nations because of the policies pursued by the developed nations. Specifically, whether we are talking about colonialism or neocolonialism or imperialism, at the end of the day, all of these policies resulted, in essence, in the stealing of the resources and the wealth of the developed nations, whether we're looking at South America, Africa, and so forth. So, when a powerful nation is literally stealing your resources and, in essence, enslaving your people to work for more or less free, then you will find yourself being amongst the very poor nations of today. And that's one of the reasons why these people need to immigrate. So what is the real problem with large numbers of undocumented workers in developed nations? The real problem is that they create more unemployment for the typical citizen. It is a false argument to say that undocumented workers take the jobs that the locals do not want. The reason local people do not want these jobs is because they can't afford to take them. An American cannot live with $2 or $3 washing dishes in a diner, or with $2 or $3 working on the fields. If, on the other hand, the diner or the agribusiness were to pay an American a real salary, let's say $10 or $20 an hour, with some real benefits, then you would see lines of Americans, including people with degrees, begging for those jobs. The reason the undocumented worker does take these jobs is because they do not mind to sleep on the floor with 20 other people so that they can save a few dollars here and there to send back home and help their poor families. But how should we target this problem? How should we resolve this if the real problem is not the undocumented worker themselves? Keep in mind, this is a human being that's trying to do the best they can for themselves and their families, just like you and I would. If you wish to solve this problem, the real solution in the long term would be to stop exploiting their countries. If we do not exploit these developing nations, if we allow them to develop on their own, if we do not use the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and all these free trade agreements to rip them off silly, then maybe they would have enough opportunities to employ their own people and be happy where they are. In fact, if you ask many of these undocumented workers, they'll tell you straight out, they would never want to be in this country if they could live back home and have a job. So stop exploiting them and they'll stay where they are. But what we do now, as I mentioned before, is exploit their homelands and then force them to come to our countries where we continue exploiting them at the individual level. Furthermore, until the working classes obtain control of their own governments in the developed nations and force them to stop exploiting other countries, what should be done in practical terms when it comes to these undocumented workers in the here and now? A solution would not be to apply Arizona-style laws. If you were to accept these Arizona-style laws, which on the surface seem very tempting to a working-class person to accept, what you would be doing is willingly create a police state. And a police state is never to the benefit of the working class. Instead, a practical solution would be to not target the undocumented worker at all, to not force them back home and rip them out of their communities and destroy the lives of their children and themselves. That's not exactly humane. Instead, what we should be doing in these developed nations is targeting those who employ the undocumented workers if we really don't want to have them here. For example, why are we allowing huge agribusinesses to employ thousands of undocumented workers right in the open? Why are we slapping with petty fines these employers who willingly pick up people from the streets to employ them. Instead, we should have severe fines and penalties for any business and or employer who willingly accepts undocumented workers. I'll give you one example. Let's say a company has, regardless of where the operations are located, in total 1,000 undocumented workers. Have a law that says that company will be shut down and its assets auctioned off and nationalized by the government. See if any other company would want to hire undocumented workers after you nationalize and sell off the assets of a few big businesses that employ undocumented workers in large numbers. But when it comes to the smaller employers, let's say landscapers, they too should be severely punished. Put them in jail. Create a felony out of employing somebody without documentation. And if you were to apply these severe laws and actually enforce them, because it's not enough to have laws on the books, you also have to actually enforce them, then see what happens to the supply of undocumented workers. They're not going to come here anymore. They're going to leave if they're already here. And that's how you solve the problem of undocumented workers. To end, I have to state once more that the problem is not the undocumented worker. If anything, they are a victim. Just like the working class person that is a citizen of the developed nation is also a victim by illegal immigration. Rather, we should be focusing on the policies of both the developed and developing nations that, in essence, create this massive wave of immigration, and we have to target those who profit by employing undocumented workers, and that is the employers, not the workers. Workers are brothers and sisters regardless of where they come from. Problem is, they have to learn how to work together to solve their problems collectively and not fight with each other, which is exactly what the rich are doing now. The rich are pitting one working class against another working class, arguing that they are each other's problems, when in fact the rich of, let's say, Mexico, together with the rich of the United States, are the common problem of the poor in Mexico and America. It is these international elites that are creating the undocumented worker problem for everyone. And if we were able to block these elites from imposing these policies of theirs, we would all be better off.
Ya que exista algún respeto, no metamos las narices, no que inflamos la moneda, haciendo guerra a otros países. Te pagamos con petróleo o intereses nuestra deuda. Mientras tanto no sabemos qué se queda.